Hello all and happy Wednesday. Today we're going to be continuing with Walt Whitman's Song of Myself by reading section 6 on page 179 in your ebook. In today's assignment in Teams, I included a video of the poem being read aloud, so you should have already listened to the poem before watching this video. If you haven't done that yet, pause the video and go do that now. Alright, diving right into the poem. So an important lens to view this poem through is the question the child asks in the first line of the poem. What is the grass? The entire poem is Whitman attempting to answer that question. So think of every line, image, and metaphor as an answer to that child's question, and it will help you better understand what Whitman is saying here. In a poem, poets use several techniques in order to convey their principal themes, or their message, just like in a short story. Whitman does this throughout the poem. Take a look at his initial attempt to answer the question in the first 11 lines. Whitman uses 4 metaphors here as an answer to the child's question. Remember that a metaphor is comparing two unlike things without using like or as. When asked, what is the grass, Whitman answers first, I guess it must be the flag of my disposition. Disposition meaning a person's inherent qualities of mind and character. Second, he says he guesses the grass is the handkerchief of the Lord. Then he says the grass is itself a child. And finally, I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphic. So take a look at the 4 things he names in his metaphors. He starts off personal, saying the flag is the grass, or the grass is the flag of his disposition, or his character. Remember that romantics really valued nature, so Whitman is tying nature to his beliefs and his character here. Then Whitman gets more spiritual by saying grass is the handkerchief of the Lord. Note here that he's not saying something negative. He's not saying grass is something the Lord blows his nose into. He goes on by saying it's the handkerchief of the Lord designedly dropped, bearing the owner's name that we may see and remark and say whose. He's saying the grass is something we might look down and see and say, oh, whose is that? It's beautiful. Who does it belong to? According to Whitman, grass is something that might have us in awe of creation. Then Whitman gets more universal, saying grass is a child, the produced babe of the vegetation. Here he's remarking that everything is created in nature, whether it's a seed that grows into grass or the biological union that creates a child. Whitman stays universal with the final metaphor, comparing grass to a uniform hieroglyphic. We know from the footnote that a hieroglyphic is a picture symbol used in a writing system to represent sounds or words. A hieroglyphic is a symbol that represents something, so a uniform hieroglyphic would be a symbol everyone understands. What theme is Whitman trying to develop in these lines? What is he trying to say in answer to the child's question? Moving on to this next section right here, you'll notice that there's repetition just like there was in the last section. So up here we have the repetition of I guess it, I guess it, I guess, I guess. And then down here we have more repetition with it may be, it may be, it may be. There are also other instances of repetition used in the poem, so be on the lookout for those and see how they help you figure out the meaning. On the next page, the first of the questions you'll be answering asks you about Whitman's repetition and how the sound of that repetition contributes to the meaning of the poem. Why would Whitman be using repetition? He's using it to help convey his theme, his message. But how is the repetition helping him do that? What other kinds of works can you think of that include repetition? And why would Whitman be calling upon that genre? Pause this video for a second and click on the Close Read button. Listen to the readers discuss this next section of the poem and the imagery and tone Whitman is using in it. Welcome back. So, after Whitman discusses his respect of the grass because it comes from the people that have lived and died before him, he starts listing. At the bottom of this page and onto the next, he lists. I wish I could translate the hints about the dead young men and women, and the hints about old men and mothers and the offspring taken soon out of their laps. What do you think has become of the young and old men, and what do you think has become of the women and children? He asks this question of himself, of the child, of the reader. Then he comes to a conclusion in line 27. They are alive and well somewhere. In talking about these people who have died in the history of the earth, why would Whitman choose to list them this way? Question number 2 asks you about this choice that Whitman makes and what it means, and also asks you to think about how this technique impacts the conclusion Whitman comes to in line 27. So, as you're answering this question, think carefully about the choices Whitman is making here. He lists all these people, all these types of people who have died. Old men, young men, women, oops, sorry, I skipped too much up. Old men, and now we're glitching. Okay, so he thinks about old men, young men, he talks about mothers, he talks about children, all these different types of people that have died. And then he says, they are alive and well somewhere. What is he saying? And what impact does that have on the poem and on the reader? Finally, think about what the readers in the close read video said about tone in this poem. Whitman is talking a lot about death and about how much of it there's been in the history of the earth, but his tone is more reverent than sad. He ends the poem by saying the smallest sprout shows there is really no death, and if ever there was, it led forward life and does not wait at the end to arrest it, and ceased the moment life appeared. All goes onward and outward, nothing collapses, and to die is different from what anyone supposed, and luckier. Question 3 asks you to break down the deeper meaning or symbolism grass has in this section of Song of Myself. For this question, remember that section 6 is just Whitman trying to answer the question the child asks him. What is the grass? So, what is Whitman's answer?